A federal judge struck down Oklahoma's ban on same-sex marriage as unconstitutional on Tuesday. Voters approved a statewide question prohibiting same-sex unions 9 years ago. The judge said the ban discriminated against same-sex couples for no rational reason and added protecting the sanctity of marriage was not a valid reason for the ban. But the judge also prevented the ruling from taking effect until the case makes its course through the appeals process. Here with more insight on the long-running court battle is Chris Castile from the Oklahoma's Washington, D.C. office. Sir, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely, Dave.
Well, Chris, how soon will we see same-sex marriages in Oklahoma because of this ruling?
Yeah, Dave, it's anybody's guess. I mean, it could be months, it could be years, and it could possibly be never. You know, as you said, the judge stayed his ruling, put a hold on his own ruling, essentially, while this case makes its way to, through the appeals court. There was a case in Utah in December, almost identical, really, to Oklahoma's case, where a federal judge overturned that state's ban on same-sex marriage. They actually passed it overwhelmingly the same year that Oklahoma passed it. That case has already gone to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. There was a period there, I think it was a little more than 2 weeks, where same-sex couples in Utah were allowed to marry.
It seems like they rushed out and started the process, right?
They absolutely did. And the Supreme Court, and the judge there would not put a hold on his own ruling. The U.S. Supreme Court ultimately did last week, put a hold on his ruling while the 10th Circuit hears this case, the Utah case. So now you've got, yesterday, the Oklahoma judge, federal judge in Tulsa, basically doing the same thing as the Utah judge. We've got a similar case, and it presumably is now going to go to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals has put that Utah case on a fast track. They want all of the briefs, all the written arguments, that is, in by late February. They don't really want anybody to linger on that. They want to get this case decided. So, even though it's on kind of a fast track, I mean, it conceivably could be a few months before they make their decision. And what they decide in that case, in the Utah case, and maybe they even consolidate with the Oklahoma case rather than taking the Oklahoma case separately, is going to guide the law for all of the states in that circuit. You know, the federal court system is divided up in regions that they call circuits, and we are in the same region and circuit with Utah. So it will apply, whether they uphold the judge's ruling in Utah or reverse it. That's going to have some impact obviously on whether there are any more marriages in Utah and Oklahoma, where they can begin them. If they uphold these rulings, I assume the Supreme Court lifts that stay, and they can start having marriages in Utah and Oklahoma within months as soon as they make that ruling, but not necessarily. Because at that point, if the 10th Circuit upholds the Utah case and the Oklahoma case, the Supreme Court may say, wait a minute, we're going to take this issue on. We don't want to have a bunch of marriages in these two states that will then, have to be reversed or whatever, have their status changed by a ruling. So we just have no idea how these next legal steps are going to play out. But again, I mean, it could be a while or it could be never.
And the federal judge that we're talking about, the one that struck down the Oklahoma ban on gay marriage, is U.S. Senior District Judge Terrence Curran. We are chatting with Chris Castile via Skype from Washington, D.C. Chris, another question for you. Is there any timeline for the U.S. Supreme Court to consider the issue of state bans on same-sex marriage?
There's not, and I'll try not to get so wrapped around all the head spinning.
Well, there's 9 layers of complication in this, so it's hard to keep it concise.
It is, and especially for me, but everybody expects, after last year when they decided the federal law, when the Supreme Court struck down the federal law, that denied federal benefits to same-sex couples, they also, basically on a technicality, declined to rule on a state ban out of California. But everybody assumed that, eventually the Supreme Court is going to have to take on this issue of whether states can ban same-sex marriages. So when they do that is an open question. A couple of legal experts, including a constitutional professor at OU today, said if the 10th Circuit is to uphold the Utah and Oklahoma decisions, the Supreme Court may take it immediately. And just, give, again, like I said about the marriages, you don't want a bunch of marriages to occur that then, have their status thrown into question later. So they might just take it then. But if they don't, if the 10th Circuit reverses those cases and says that it was okay for the states to ban gay marriage, the Supreme Court may wait a while. They may wait for other lower court cases to emerge before they decide to, take on the issue. Just kind of hear what lower courts, whether they be, the district judges or the appeals court, what they have to say about this issue before they decide to wade into it again. That's why I said it could be years. And if the Supreme Court ultimately rules, when they do take a case, that states can ban same-sex marriage, then it will be never. One would think, unless there's some kind of sea change of heart in Oklahoma as far as this issue is concerned, although in 2004, 9 years ago, it passed with 76% of the vote. So if the Supreme Court decides that states can ban it, then it would be up to Oklahoma then to change, its constitution to allow it.
You mentioned 9 years, but Judge Kern had this for 9 years, right?
He did. And so did in fairness to him, not that I need to defend him, the Utah judge had it for 9 years as well. And, they're all just all kinds of legal, machinations that happened in this Oklahoma case that delayed it for, I don't want to say good, but understandable reasons it delayed it. And then once the U.S. Supreme Court, agreed to take those cases, I believe they agreed to take them in 2012 and heard them in 2013. Then I think a lot of the federal judges just backed off at that point and said, let's let the U.S. Supreme Court have their say, and we'll go from there. So, it's been, 6-7 months since the Supreme Court decided the same-sex marriage federal issue. And, Judge Kern let the lawyers file some briefs in this case after the Supreme Court to kind of argue how that Supreme Court case affected this state case, and then he decided it.
And his ruling can be found on newsok.com. It's 68 pages long, and Chris has already scanned through those 68 pages, so he has provided us with context and analysis that we very much appreciate. Chris, thanks for your time today.
All right, Dave, glad to do it.
And more from Chris Castill can be found in upcoming editions of The Oklahoman and online at newsok.com.